Somewhere above 10,000 feet in Eagle County, Colorado, there is a town the government does not want you to visit. The houses still have furniture inside them. The hospital still has X-rays scattered on the floor. Cars from the 1950s sit rusting in garages nobody ever came back for. And a sign on the road warns of hidden and visible dangers, and the risk of injury or death. This is not fiction, and it isn't an urban legend either. It is a real town, sitting on private land, guarded and off-limits, and it sits at the very end of this list, because once you understand exactly what happened there, you will understand why it earned the top spot over 16 other places that most people, even most Coloradans, have never heard of. Colorado's mountains hide towns like this in nearly every valley, places where entire communities lived, worked, and eventually vanished, sometimes by choice and sometimes by force. Stick around, because number 1 is the strangest and by far the heaviest story on this entire list. Today we're counting down 17 of the weirdest and most isolated ghost towns in Colorado. Real places you can still find on a map, each one abandoned for a different reason, and each one carrying something strange enough that even lifelong Colorado residents don't know the full story. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, because we cover forgotten places like these every week, and I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. Drop it in the comments. Now let's start the countdown. Number 17 is Ironton, tucked into the Red Mountain Pass corridor between Ouray and Silverton. Founded in 1883 as a smelting town, Ironton once processed ore from some of the richest mines in the San Juan Mountains and supported more than 1,000 residents. It served as a transportation link for the mining district for decades. But when the smelter shut its doors in 1922, the town had no reason left to exist, and by the 1950s it was completely empty. What makes Ironton strange today is how much still stands along that lonely stretch of highway, rusted equipment, and hollow buildings facing a road most drivers pass in minutes without a second look. From there, the road climbs higher toward 2 towns that were built almost side by side and abandoned for almost the exact same reason. Number 16 is Winfield, deep in a narrow canyon north of Buena Vista. In its early years, Winfield swelled to about 1,500 people, with saloons, a smelter, a school, and a church squeezed onto just over 100 acres of mountain land that was given away in small parcels to anyone willing to build. Today, only a handful of log structures remain, including the old schoolhouse. What's unsettling about Winfield is the silence of it. A town built for over 1,000 people that now has none, its buildings still standing exactly where the last residents left them. Just down the same canyon sits its twin. Number 15 is Vicksburg, named for a general store owner named Vic Keller, who once watched around 700 people move into this narrow stretch of Clear Creek Canyon chasing gold and silver. The prospectors planted rows of poplar trees along the main street, and remarkably, those same trees are still standing more than a century later, framing empty storefronts instead of shoppers. Vicksburg was never truly deserted overnight. People simply stopped coming, one by one, until the trees outlived the town they were planted to shade. From this quiet canyon, we head toward a town whose name became a warning in itself. Number 14 is Tin Cup, once nicknamed the Tombstone of Colorado. It earned that reputation the hard way. Sheriffs sent to keep order rarely lasted long, and the town cemetery still holds the evidence of exactly how short some of those careers were. Shootouts between lawmen and outlaws were common enough that locals simply expected them. Tin Cup boomed on gold and silver, and like so many mountain camps, it emptied out once the ore ran thin, leaving behind wooden buildings and a graveyard that tells a rougher story than most. From lawlessness in the mountains, we move to a town split between two names and one bitter argument over power. Number 13 covers Rosita and its sister settlement Querida, hidden in the wet mountains of Custer County. Rosita bloomed fast, growing to more than 1,000 residents and 400 buildings within just 2 years of its founding in 1872. It even became the county seat in 1878. But in 1886, in a bitter political struggle, the neighboring town of Silver Cliff stripped Rosita of that title, and the town's decline accelerated from there. Nearby Querida, founded by the man who discovered the rich Bassick silver mine, followed a similar arc into abandonment. Hollywood even used Rosita's old post office as a movie backdrop decades after the town went quiet. From a stolen title, we travel to a town that once dreamed of becoming the capital of an entire state. Number 12 is Capital City. Up the rugged Henson Creek and Engineer Pass Road west of Lake City. Its founder, George S. Lee, genuinely believed this remote mountain settlement could become the capital of Colorado. He built himself a mansion here, and the town briefly held hotels, saloons, a smelter, and a sawmill spread across 200 acres. Lee's dream never came close to happening, and today only 2 structures remain standing, including the old post office. Capital City is a monument to a plan that never got off the ground, buried in a canyon almost nobody drives through anymore. From one man's failed ambition, we move to a town that quite literally helped power the modern world. Number 11 is Alta, near Telluride. And its story is stranger than most because Alta didn't just fade away, it changed history first. In 1891, an engineer named Lucien Nunn needed a cheaper way to power the struggling Gold King mine here, and he turned to George Westinghouse and the alternating current designs associated with Nikola Tesla. The result, built just below Alta, became one of the first commercial uses of alternating current anywhere in the world. Despite that breakthrough, a fire later destroyed the town's primary mill, and production slowed until Alta joined the ranks of Colorado's abandoned settlements. It's strange to stand among crumbling cabins knowing the wiring of the modern electrical grid owes something to this exact spot. From a technological turning point, we head north to a town that vanished from a map faster than almost any place on this list. Number 10 is Teller City, tucked deep in the forests of North Park, southeast of Walden. At its peak, nearly 2,000 people lived here, supported by close to 30 saloons and a 40-room hotel. Then the value of silver collapsed, and according to local accounts, families left so abruptly that plates and silverware were reportedly left sitting on tables, as if supper might resume at any moment. By 1902, Teller City was empty. Today, the pine forest has swallowed most of it, leaving scattered cabins and foundations for hikers willing to make the trip. From a town abandoned mid-meal, we move to the only settlement of its kind in Colorado's entire history. Number 9 is Deerfield, out on the eastern plains near Greeley, and it stands apart from every other town on this list because it wasn't built on gold or silver at all. Founded in 1910 by Oliver Toussaint Jackson, Deerfield became Colorado's largest all-black settlement, home to roughly 300 residents at its peak, complete with a school, churches, a doctor's office, and a hotel. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl years hit the farming community hard, and by the mid-20th century, most residents had moved on. A handful of structures still stand today, including Jackson's own house, now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Deerfield's story is one of resilience against odds that had nothing to do with mining and everything to do with the land itself turning against its people. From the open plains, we climb back into the mountains, toward a pass so brutal it forced its residents to invent their own way out. Number 8 is Independence, perched above 11,000 feet on what is now Independence Pass. Gold drew about 1,000 workers here by 1882, but the fortune didn't last. Winters at this elevation could plunge to 40 degrees below zero, and by 1899 the town faced a legendary blizzard that trapped the remaining residents for weeks. According to the Aspen Historical Society, those residents eventually dismantled parts of their own homes to build makeshift skis, using them to escape across the pass toward Aspen. Today, the general store and the remains of an old stamp mill still stand at over 10,000 feet, a reminder of how far people were willing to go, quite literally, to survive. From a desperate escape on skis, we head toward the best-preserved ghost town in the entire state. Number 7 is St. Elmo, west of Buena Vista, often called Colorado's most original ghost town. Founded in 1880 along Chalk Creek, it grew to more than 2,000 residents within a year, complete with saloons, dance halls, and its own railroad station. Two devastating fires, in 1890 and 1898, began the town's slow decline, but St. Elmo never fully died. By 1943, only 2 siblings from the Stark family remained, the last people keeping the town alive, and they quietly turned its buildings into summer cabins rather than let them collapse. 43 structures still stand today, giving St. Elmo the eerie feeling of a movie set nobody bothered to strike. From the best-preserved town on our list, we move to one buried by a single winter storm. Number 6 is Animas Forks, hidden along the Alpine Loop northeast of Silverton at over 11,000 feet, one of the highest ghost towns in the country. In 1884, a severe blizzard buried the town under as much as 25 feet of snow, so deep that residents reportedly had to dig tunnels between buildings just to reach each other. The town held on for decades after that storm, but the final blow came around 1920, when the massive Gold Prince Mill was dismantled and hauled away to the neighboring town of Eureka. What's left today includes the striking 2-story Duncan House, with a bay window that seems almost out of place this far from civilization. From a town buried alive by snow, we head to a mining camp that once outgrew Aspen itself. Number 5 is Ashcroft, 11 miles up Castle Creek Road from Aspen, sitting at over 9,000 feet in a valley known for brutal, isolating winters. In the early 1880s, Ashcroft actually rivaled and briefly surpassed Aspen in size, growing to somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 residents with 6 hotels and 20 saloons. But promised rail links to Crested Butte never materialized, and investors and workers drifted toward Aspen's richer strikes instead. The population crashed to around 100 summer residents by 1885. One man, Jack Leahy, stayed behind long after everyone else had gone, living alone in the empty town until his death in 1939, the moment historians mark as Ashcroft officially becoming a ghost town. From one man's decades of solitude, we moved to a mining camp where an entire community was locked away by disease. If you're enjoying this list, take a second to hit subscribe, because we're only about halfway through, and the next few towns get significantly stranger. Number 4 is Sneffels, perched above 10,000 feet on the south face of the mountain that shares its name in Ouray County. At its peak, roughly 2,000 people lived here, supported by the massive revenue mill and its 2-mile-long tunnel, one of the great engineering projects of its era. But historical accounts describe something else happening in this remote camp. A smallpox outbreak that forced a quarantine, trapping residents in one of the most isolated places in the San Juan Mountains with nowhere to run and no way to know how long the sickness would last. The mines kept producing for years afterward, until a fire destroyed the revenue mill in 1915 and sent the district into its final decline. From a quarantine on a mountainside, we moved to a town that traded its miners for scientists and never quite let go of its dead. Number 3 is Gothic, north of Crested Butte. And it might be the strangest entry on this entire list because Gothic is technically not empty anymore. The town exploded to life in 1879 after an explosion at the nearby sylvanite mine scattered strands of pure silver across the ground. It grew to roughly 1,000 residents and even hosted a visit from President Ulysses S. Grant. When the silver market collapsed, almost everyone left, except for one man, Garwood Judd, who stayed behind alone for 15 years, inspiring a 1928 film called The Man Who Stayed. That same year, a biologist named Dr. John Johnson bought the abandoned town and turned it into the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory, which still operates there today, filled with researchers every summer. Locals in nearby Crested Butte still tell of a hitchhiking ghost near the cemetery who asks for a ride back to Gothic. From a town that refused to stay empty, we head to one of the highest and hardest to reach places in the state, split in two by an invisible line most people have never heard of. Number 2 is Carson, straddling the Continental Divide at nearly 12,000 feet in Hinsdale County, one of the most difficult ghost towns in Colorado to reach even today. There were actually 2 Carsons. Old Carson, the original camp on the Pacific side of the divide, and the newer Carson, built lower down after the first proved too brutal even for hardened miners. At its peak around 1900, roughly 500 miners worked the mountaintop for gold and silver. The Winters eventually won. In 1946, a writer named Muriel Sybil Wool rode into Carson on horseback researching the state's ghost towns and was caught in the empty settlement by a sudden electrical storm. She returned in 1948 and was trapped by another storm, one that old-timers claimed was drawn in by the iron deposits buried in the surrounding hills. 7 buildings still stand there today, accessible only by a rough 4-wheel drive road that keeps most casual visitors away entirely. Robert Brown, who wrote guidebooks to Colorado's Jeep trails in the 1960s, once described the route to Carson as one of the worst in the entire state, and by most accounts it still deserves that reputation. From a mountaintop struck by lightning twice, we arrive at the town this entire list has been building toward. Number 1 is Gilman, perched on a 600-foot cliff above the Eagle River in Eagle County, and it is unlike anything else on this list, because Gilman wasn't slowly abandoned. It was evacuated. Founded in 1886 during the Colorado silver boom, Gilman grew into a full company town under the New Jersey Zinc Company, eventually producing around 10 million tons of ore across nearly a century of mining. In 1984, the Environmental Protection Agency ordered the town closed because of severe toxic contamination in the soil and groundwater. 2 years later, Gilman was formally designated a Superfund site, with 8 million tons of contaminated mine waste spread across the property. Families were told to leave, and by most accounts, they left quickly. Homes still contain furniture and appliances. The old hospital still has X-rays scattered where they were left. Cars from the 1950s and 60s still sit parked in garages that nobody ever returned to. Former residents interviewed decades later describe the town with real affection, remembering trick-or-treating in the neighborhood locals called Uptown, and raspberries picked along the riverbank as kids. That affection sits uneasily next to the orange-tinted runoff cleanup crews spent years scrubbing out of the Eagle River. Cleanup efforts were declared largely successful by the year 2000, but the site remains private property, strictly off-limits, watched over by warning signs about hidden and visible dangers. Of everywhere on this list, Gilman is the one place where an entire community had almost no say in the moment they had to walk away, and the town has been frozen mid-departure ever since. That's all 17. From a smelting town swallowed by the Red Mountain Pass fog to a poisoned company town locked behind government warning signs, Colorado's mountains are still hiding more of these places than most people will ever see in person. Some open to hikers with a good pair of boots, and others sealed off for good reason. If one of these towns caught your attention, let me know which one down in the comments, and tell me if you'd ever make the drive out to see it yourself. If you want more forgotten corners of the American West uncovered like this, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.